Donald Trump's promised change, and boy, did he deliver on day one. In a dramatic opening salvo, the 45th president fired 1,000 government staffers, claiming they didn't align with his vision to make America great again. Among them, a celebrity chef from an advisory task force dismissed over a restaurant dispute tied to immigration policies. There is a very clear message now from the Oval Office. If you are not on board, you are out. But that's not all. Trump took the reins of executive power, signing nearly 200 actions, dismantling 78 Biden-era policies and launching a full-scale crackdown on illegal immigration. He's making it a national emergency. And did you see the faces of his opponents during the inauguration ceremony as he was mentioning these? What does it all mean? Well, federal raids could be sweeping across major US cities anytime. A show of force, a promise kept by his base to his base, and also perhaps a sign of turbulent times ahead for America's immigration communities, those immigrants there too. There is so much to get through. Veronica, what did you make of it all?
He has really hit the ground running. This is something that he has truly been preparing for this last several years. He's also trying to deliver on his campaign promises, in which he said that he would start ushering out these executive orders, something that we have never seen before. He did it at the Capital One Arena, which is the sports complex in Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of different teams that play, and fans, of course, know that building well. And so this was really history in the making as he sat there at that desk that they brought in. And of course, he had his staffers announce what those EOs were that he was signing. And so this is something that they clearly had in the works. They were prepared and they were really ready for this day. But it's not just that. Even recently, he just announced a $500 billion AI initiative called Stargate, and that's something he's working with Sam Altman with, also Oracle and other leaders. They're at the White House now discussing this. So he is not taking a minute's rest, really.
No, he isn't. And obviously he said that he was going to be dictator for one day on day one, and that he would deliver. Throwing those pens, as you mentioned, at the stadium after signing his name. I mean, how's that signature, by the way? This is about for him trying to say to his followers, his fans, that I'm all about bringing government back to you, the idea of transparency. By the end of the week, it could be that we find out what actually happened with JFK, with Martin Luther King, with Robert Kennedy as well. The idea is that government has become out of control. It needs to be more transparent. Do you think that day one moved in that direction?
It certainly did, and this is for the more than 77 million Americans who voted for him. It was a clear mandate. He not only won the Electoral College, but also the popular vote. So this was the mandate for him to move forward with these ideas that he proposed, and that Americans said they wanted to actually see happen. And again, Americans pay their taxes, and so the government is supposed to work for them. They are the employer, so to speak, and you can look at the government as almost employees, these senators and also representatives all in the House. And so when you start to see the government with some of these advisory councils and task force and panels, and what are they looking at? What are they studying? Americans who are struggling to pay their bills and to put food on the table are really wondering to themselves. And, I do think that was a big push for them to support the Trump-Vance ticket.
Let's talk about the Vice President Vance, who sworn in Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. This happening across the road from the White House, of course, next door at the Eisenhower Executive Office building in Washington. Rubio says that he's committed to implementing the Trump administration's foreign policy. What does that look like this time around compared to last time? Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong was in Washington as well as part of this. And you must wonder about the alignment of this. Penny Wong, an openly gay foreign minister for Australia from a Chinese heritage background, representing Australia, the Trump administration, and having to say, look, they've got different policies. We have, from Australia's perspective, our ambassador to the United States is a former Labor left-wing Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, who has hit out at Donald Trump. But one thing we know about Donald Trump, of course, is that many of the people who are sitting on his side of the aisle at that inauguration ceremony are people who have in the past been incredibly critical of Donald Trump, including during the primaries, including during his first presidency. He, in some cases, is able to forgive and move on. But when it comes to foreign policy, how does that look? Particularly when you look at, say, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who openly has been incredibly critical of Donald Trump, now finds himself in that special relationship with the United States.
Well, I think we have heard a lot from President Trump on his stance in terms of foreign policy. He does have an America First initiative. That is something that he wants to try to lead to. He feels that he needs to right the ship in terms of balancing the budget. And when you look at the trillions of dollars that the United States, owes, and if they were to default, that would be a major issue. That is something that lawmakers have continuously kicked that can down the road, and they really want to try to tackle that. Obviously, we are seeing some foreign adversaries like Russia and China and others coming together and maybe starting their own group. And so this is something that we have seen the president really wanting to make sure that safety is something that maybe it's peace through strength. And of course, we heard his threats to the militant group that was holding the hostages in Gaza. And of course, they were released. And so this was something that was 18 months long. We kept listening to former President Biden and former Secretary of State Antony Blinken constantly having these weekly meetings, sometimes multiple ones, and nothing was moving, nothing was happening. And we heard from President Trump saying they better be released by my inauguration day, and they were.
Let's talk about the pardoning of 1,500 January 6 protesters or rioters, depending on your point of view. There's been a lot of reaction, a lot of angry reaction. New York Senator Chuck Schumer leading the charge. Take a look.
And sadly, it's a golden age for lawlessness and lawbreakers who were pardoned yesterday by President Trump. There is no other way to describe President Trump's pardon of January 6th offenders than un-American. It is so deeply un-American to do that, to pardon them. And let's be clear, President Trump didn't just pardon protesters. He pardoned individuals convicted of assaulting police officers. He pardoned individuals convicted of seditious conspiracy. And he pardoned those who attempted to undermine our democracy.
Now, I've got a lot of views on this. Obviously, what we saw on January 6th didn't look great. I know that there are perspectives that it had been kind of brought on and that it was set as a trap by Democrats, by Nancy Pelosi, and that she was welcoming them through. I've seen a lot, heard a lot, but people did die, and that isn't what we want to see ever. There feels like there's such a massive divide that's only gotten worse. Watching the inauguration ceremony, I don't know about you, but I just couldn't believe it. I don't feel like I've ever been more uncomfortable sitting in my lounge room at 3 in the morning watching this when you've got Donald Trump there saying things, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama sitting behind kind of in shock. He's talking about us, but one of the big things is about the idea of an end to political prisoners. Now, the Biden administration didn't believe that, because 15 minutes before midnight or midday, as is in the Constitution, he signed off to protect his family, everyone except for Jill Biden, claiming that he's worried. Even Anthony Fauci, back to 2014, which is so bizarre, to be giving him a pardon back to 2014, which some suggest is because that's perhaps when everything in Wuhan went down. What's your view?
So I think a lot of Americans are looking at this and they're scratching their heads saying, so what is this policy that you are to be held accountable for potential wrongdoing only if you are in that group over there, not our group? Our group is okay. We're safe. The rules are not for thee, not for me, but for thee. So there's just a lot. And I think that Americans are seeing this happen. This was something that Joe Biden has talked about on the record in interviews. He's been very belligerent with the journalists who have asked him about this question, whether he would pardon Hunter, not only Hunter, but his entire family. And so that was shocking. He now has set precedent on the way out. He also pardoned the January 6th committee. Now, they are accused of destroying evidence, which included video evidence that a lot of people show the Capitol Police and other security guards opening the doors, welcoming in the Americans who were there on January 6th that day. And also Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, who refused to have the National Guard and police that then President Donald Trump had offered to her. So when you start to look at these different storylines, it's very, very confusing. It's very complex. And I think Americans are just at the point where they're tired of seeing the lies. They're tired of the infighting. They're tired of what seems to be, dirty politics normally on an everyday basis. And they want someone who's going to work for them, who's going to get things done, and who's
I think,
hopefully
though, sorry to
going
interrupt,
to
I think that one of the problems, and I say this from an Australian with the Westminster system, compared to the American system, you have two parties in the United States, right? You've got the Democrats and you've got the Republicans. We have the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. In the UK, it's the Conservatives, the Tories, as well as the Labor Party. The difference is we also have minor parties. That is where the activists and the far left and the far right can find. In Australia, we've got the One Nation Party as well as the Greens Party. And they can sometimes be brought in to a coalition if needed, but it means that if you have really strong views, you have somewhere to go. In the United States, you've got to go to one of those two major parties, and then they become the loudest voice. And as we see, so many Democrats don't agree with the DEI, but the people in charge of the party have pushed this through because the activists have wanted this, meaning that the everyday middle is being forced in a direction by activists that in a Westminster system, they find their own parties.
It is very fascinating when you look at it. We do have Republicans, and in that group, there are those who are quite conservative and those who are liberal. And then when you look to the Democrats, it's the same thing. You have those that are more conservative. We have heard, that JFK type of Democrat versus the more progressive people, which Kamala Harris, of course, was, and Bernie Sanders. And so you are right. We are seeing splits within the two-party system.
All right, let's move on.